that you will be coming out as well, South Florida. If you're in Broward County, come visit me here. I am at the Nautical Ventures Marine Superstore. It is off of Sterling, just east of 95 on 50 South Bryan Road. And again, people have been kind of coming in here with all kinds of great food items, water, all kinds of supplies, but big items are also needed. Those chainsaws, hammers, nails, batteries, flashlights, battery-operated fans. Just putting a couple ideas in your head. Come out and join me. I hope to see you.
But first, here are your headlines.
This massive fire at this apartment building in North Philadelphia. More than 100 firefighters eventually got it under control, but the roof collapsed. The building was vacant. No word on the cause of the fire.
ABC News has learned the gunman in the Odessa, Texas mass shooting failed a federal background gun check because he had been clinically diagnosed as being mentally ill. Authorities say shortly before 36-year-old Seth Ator began his rampage on the highway that ended in this swarm of bullets, he was fired from his trucking job. He and his employer then both dialed 911. Ator also called the FBI tip line just 15 minutes before the gunfire erupted.
The real estate tycoon at the center of the HBO documentary, The Jinx, is expected to go on trial today for murder after years of delays. 76-year-old Robert Durst is accused of killing his longtime confidant, Susan Berman, at her Beverly Hills home nearly 20 years ago. Prosecutors say he did it to keep her from talking to police about the 1982 disappearance of his wife. Durst was arrested in 2015 after he appeared to confess in the documentary.
We begin with Hurricane Dorian. Were you able to see the videos and images over the weekend? A massive catastrophic storm just sitting on the top of Grand Bahama Island for the last 48 hours since it made landfall as a Category 5 on Sunday. It's a brutal lashing that has left at least 5 people dead in the Abaco Islands, and we have full on-the-ground coverage all day. And I want to bring in our ABC News meteorologist, Greg Dutra, with the latest storm track. But first, Greg, I just want to ask you, have you ever seen anything like this in the Atlantic?
I truly haven't. The fact that it stalled out over Grand Bahama, worst case scenario is a Category 5 storm. They're going on almost a day and a half, 2 days now worth of winds that have been sustained over hurricane force, and even some of those gusts that we heard up to 220 miles per hour. Now, it has weakened a little bit, so let's go ahead and take a look at the maps, and I'll show you the changes that we've seen made over the last couple of days, because there are indeed some changes, and those changes, most visibly, at least on the satellite imagery, is that it's lost the eye. It was a perfect shaped eye over the last day or two. It became a little bit ragged late last night, early this morning. Now we've lost definition of the eye. Now I don't want you to think that it's lost too much strength, because it is still a very strong hurricane at a Category 2. Winds still sustained at 110 miles per hour, and that's how it is as it tracks up the coast. Still nothing to sleep on, especially if you live up in the Carolinas. This will be something to watch over the next few days. But Florida, you can breathe a bit of a sigh of relief in terms of direct landfall, but there are still going to be impacts felt. In fact, there are already impacts. Some of those winds along the coast are already getting close to our tropical storm force. Boca Raton being one of them, just 1 mile per hour off tropical storm force winds, and those could stretch inland too, all the way in towards Orlando. Here are the winds on Futurecast through the next couple of days, and I want to take you up the coast of Florida and then into Georgia and the Carolinas, as those winds will be gusting anywhere from 50 to 60 miles per hour, and there are hurricane warnings out in case those winds get up into that 74 to about 80 mile per hour range. I think we could still see some of those. It's not totally out of the picture yet, so you'd rather be safe than sorry. That's why those hurricane warnings are out all the way up the coast. Some spots that I'm concerned about for the most flooding would be around Jacksonville. The St. Johns River likes to flood in situations like this. We saw that with Matthew. Now, this is going to track more off the coast than Matthew, so I don't think it's going to be as big of a problem. And then this area of a hurricane warning, that is out for Charleston, because Charleston is very prone to flooding. They're only 20 feet above sea level. Hurricane watches stretch all the way through the Carolinas. And Kim, it is definitely not over, that threat. There is still a chance as we go out to day 3 and day 4, getting closer to Thursday and Friday, of it still making a landfall in the United States. But even if it doesn't make landfall, I feel like it's something to remember that you'll still feel the effects even down in Florida.
All right, Greg, thank you for that. But guys, remember, the situation in the Bahamas is nothing short of terrifying. Unbelievable devastation, storm surge and flooding that left people trapped in their homes as the water continued to rise. And our Marcus Moore is on the ground in Marsh Harbor as people are trying their best to survive. So, Marcus?
Swim! 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 Watch as the dangerous floodwaters sweep these 4 people away. In a race against time, our team is there, and our producer urging them to swim for their lives until they reach safety on higher ground. The group rushing to a shelter in the eye of the storm, racing to safety before the dangerous winds return.
Follow me, take your time.
Scenes like this undoubtedly playing out across the Bahamas in the wake of deadly Hurricane Dorian.
The devastation here is breathtaking. You can see that building behind me. It has collapsed, and look at this yacht on the ground resting up against this condo.
That's the front porch. The water is about 6 feet.
The rising floodwaters pouring into people's homes. This video showing the water breaching a second-floor apartment, creeping up the stairs and slamming into the window. The water so high, only rooftops were visible. And in this home, the floodwaters coming up the stairs. The furniture bobbing in the water. Ezra King and his cousin have been using a bulldozer to rescue people from their homes and take them to shelters. Category 5 storm shredding home after home. The Salvation Army estimating up to 13,000 have either been damaged or destroyed. The Coast Guard sending helicopters to rescue about a dozen people. WPLG reporter Janice Fernandez describing the apocalyptic scene.
But it truly does. It looks like a bomb just went off. Mother Nature is so much more powerful than I could ever imagine.
Rescuers receiving thousands of distress calls, but the floodwaters too dangerous to traverse.
It is extremely dangerous. I've never seen anything like this before in my entire life.
The Freeport, Bahamas airport submerged. Residents returning to what's left of their community, now covered in debris for as far as the eye can see. Boats and cars littering the street, now a familiar scene.
And you can see the power of this storm. Trees have been snapped, this boat left on its top. Just absolutely incredible damage.
Officials telling residents to stay indoors, keep hammers ready in case they have to escape the attic.
All right, thank you, Marcus. That was absolutely devastating to see. You know, one thing that surprised me about your forecast is, you know, the hurricane is 90 miles off the coast of Florida, but you're saying it's not going to make direct landfall.
Isn't that incredible that in this day and age, 90 miles off the coast, and we're not worried about landfall? Our cone of uncertainty is out of the coast of Florida. You're still going to feel the impacts. There's still tropical storm force winds and hurricane warnings, so you're not completely off the hook in Florida. But as this does skirt off the coast, no, it's not going to make landfall in Florida. The chance here that it does make landfall in South or North Carolina is still on the table. It looks like the coast of Georgia is out of the picture. And still, I can't stress it enough, even if it doesn't make landfall in Florida, they're going to feel the effects, especially with that storm surge and also rip currents.
Yes, definitely, which is why we're going to go to our Victor Ocando, who is just south of Jupiter, Florida, in Delray Beach. So, Victor, if you're there, I just want you to tell us how people are preparing where you are.
Well, Kimberly, I would say they took this storm very seriously. And how could you not? It's been an absolute monster. We've seen those devastating images coming out of the Bahamas. Here in Delray Beach, we're in one of those mandatory evacuation zones, one of those barrier islands that Ginger was just talking about. It's surrounded by water on both sides, a very narrow strip of land. The storm surge could absolutely flood this entire area. So a lot of residents made sure to get out of here. The businesses, they shut down, they boarded up, and they cleared out. Here in Delray, we have seen some on and off rain so far today, but what I want to show you, let's go ahead and zoom in so you can take a look at the beach right now. These waves, actually the biggest that we've seen so far since we've been here all week long. The beach is actually shut down. We've seen a few people walking along the coast there, and I'm not sure if you can see it, but there's actually a pretty big group of surfers out there in the water right now. No surprise, whenever a hurricane is coming to Florida, those surfers make sure to take advantage and get out there in the water, although that is exactly what officials will tell you not to do. However, what I should tell you right now, Kimberly, is that for us here in Delray and South, feeling like they definitely dodged the worst of Hurricane Dorian. Kimberly?
And Victor, this is no doubt impacting the travel, right? Lots of flight cancellations, I imagine.
Well, we just checked with a travel team, and it turns out 17 airports in Florida and the Bahamas shut down right now. Some of the major ones, Orlando International Airport, Fort Lauderdale, Hollywood International, they're actually working on resuming operations in a little less than an hour. Their goal is to be up and running at noon. And the closest airport to us here is Palm Beach International. They're closed as well, but they are trying to open up later today. Their target time is right around 3 o'clock this afternoon. We actually visited the airport. It was a total ghost town. Nobody outside, nobody inside. The check-in counters were actually covered in blue tarps. They were prepared as if water might rush in there, but as of right now, it looks like everyone here dodged the bullet. And Palm Beach International, Fort Lauderdale, Hollywood International, both trying to reopen in just a matter of hours.
All right, Victor Oquendo right there in Delray, Florida. Thank you so much. And Greg, that's kind of the key here, right? It's like just because it's off the coast doesn't mean there's not going to be any impact.
And you can bet the folks in Florida were watching the Bahamas very closely and seeing what kind of destructive forces there were. And when they were in that cone, they were definitely worried that it would make that little bit more of a westerly turn. I actually met a couple in the hotel on my way over here this morning who had left Vero Beach, Florida to come up here, and I asked them if they regretted leaving, even though the hurricane's going to stay off the coast, and they said absolutely not. They saw what was happening in the Bahamas, and they got out as a preemptive caution.
Yes, and guys, the hurricane, it's a couple days away from doing whatever the damage it's going to do on the U.S. coast, but the point of this coverage is to give you the latest information so you do have time to prepare. So now we're going to move much further up the coast to New Smyrna Beach, Florida. It's about 20 minutes away from Daytona, where we find our Serena Marshall. Serena, are you there? Good to see you. Lots of people have been arriving. Yeah, good to see you. Lots of people have been arriving there, yes, because of the evacuations, right?
Kimberly, a lot of people have been evacuating from the beach side. If you look just over my shoulder, you see that bridge. The other side are those barrier islands. That's about a mile in width there, and so those are being evacuated. They started at 10 a.m. yesterday. They're planning to shut down bridges that go up and down the intercoastal once wind speeds top 35 miles per hour. A lot of those individuals have already been evacuating. They've seen the devastation that's happened in the Bahamas, and they want no part of that.
Right, and so you've been in New Smyrna Beach since Sunday. What else have you seen?
Well, we moved from Daytona Beach over here into New Smyrna Beach, and I want to take you and show you this dock right now. You see this water, it's already lapping up over the edges of the dock. It's high tide right now, so this would be happening whether this hurricane was here or not. But when you add in that storm surge, we're expecting to see this water overflow this grass area, go into the street. During Hurricane Matthew, which also skirted the coastline of Florida, they saw the water come up over into the street and probably go up at least a foot. So if this hurricane follows a similar path, if it does skirt the coast, we'll definitely be seeing some flooding here. Now, as you mentioned, I actually grew up in Daytona Beach. I can tell you families are evacuating. They are not playing games with this. We've all heard of the so-called Waffle House test. I have a best friend test. This is a family that never, ever evacuates. They have 2 generators. They have their own water pump. They have supplies for days. And even they decided to leave, go inland to Orlando because they saw, like I said, the devastation. They're worried about how the beach side will handle this. Matthew, up the coast here about 45 minutes away in Flagler, decimated A1A, that road that lines the beach side over there. And so that road is still under construction, in fact, 3 years later. So they're prepared for the worst, hoping for the best. Kimberly?
All right, thank you, Serena. Right there in New Smyrna Beach. And now we want to go further all the way up the state in Jacksonville. And I want to bring in Kaylee Hartung, who is right there on Atlantic Beach, in Atlantic Beach, Florida. Kaylee, it looks like it's about to downpour where you are.
Yeah, that's what we think, Kimberly. The sky has darkened behind me so quickly. We think it's a matter of minutes before the rain is coming down here, which we really have not yet experienced to this point. You can see the sea foam here. I mean, it is coming already so high up this beach where an access point is right here. That's not where the tide would usually be coming, even at its highest tide. You said we're here in Atlantic Beach. I've got the Chief of Police, Michelle Cook, here with me. You were kind enough to let us hop in the car when you all got a call that there were some people in the water. These beaches have been closed since the night before last, and yet explain to us what we saw when we got here.
Sure. Unfortunately, we have folks that are venturing out into the water. It's really choppy, it's really unsafe, and this is just, this is a nightmare situation for us because they're out there and we can't get them in, and they're refusing to come in, and that just makes our first responders very uneasy to have people out in the water like this.
the concern, rip currents. What do you see when you look out there and you see waves this size?
Rip currents are an issue. The waves are really choppy. They're really rough. The water's rough, and our ocean rescue folks would have a heck of a time trying to get out there to help anybody if they needed help.
These beaches, like we said, have been closed since the day before last, and yet we see people walking their dogs, kids with their feet in the water. What is your message to people in your community right now?
The message is stay out of the water, stay off the beach, stay out of the water. All we need is one rogue wave or somebody to get knocked off their feet and swept out into the ocean. You know, it is a spectacle. It is interesting to see. If you wanted to come to one of the end zones and stand on the pavement and look, that's one thing, but please don't venture out in the sand. Please don't venture out into the water.
We had to walk over one of these berms that's been built. At first glance, it looks like maybe you put the sand there just to keep people off the beach, but it's been explained to me they serve a much greater purpose.
Yeah, absolutely. So we put sand at the end zones to prevent the wave action from going up into the streets, which will ultimately protect the property of the homes that are along the beach side and the businesses that are along the beach side.
You've lived in this area your whole life. Talk me through your perspective on this storm as you see it headed this way, what you've experienced here in storms past. Not that long ago it was Matthew and then it was Irma. What looks familiar to you when you see this path?
The rough surf, the rough seas, all look familiar. Unfortunately, because we've only taken glancing blows in the past, people are very lax. And, you know, this is a catastrophic storm as we see what happened in the Bahamas. And for me, the concern is people are being very relaxed about it. You know, we don't want people to panic. We don't want people to have anxiety, but don't get too relaxed, because one bump over and next thing you know, we're in the middle of severe damage, and we don't want that. We want people just to stay inside, stay in town, and just stay away from the beach.
You know, not only is the beach closed, but this is also an area under mandatory evacuation.
Yes.
We've seen so many businesses boarded up. Are you surprised that more people haven't left the island?
I am, but I think that, again, that is because we've had only glancing blows in the past, and people are hesitant about leaving their homes, and so they'd rather stay here and ride it out, and we just hope for the best at this point.
We all are. We all
Yes,
are. Thank you so much for your time. Yeah, we're here, Atlantic Beach, just north of Jacksonville Beach, and this is where we'll be riding out the storm whenever Dorian makes its way here. Kimberly?
All right, thank you so much, Kaylee. And yes, you heard from the police officer there. Just be prepared. Even if you're not taking it seriously, you want to be prepared. So our affiliate, WPBF, is covering the hurricane, and we want to go to Ron Burke, who is in Fort Pierce, Florida, with the latest from there. Ron?
I'm here on a boat slip at the Fort Pierce Inlet in St. Lucie County, where we have a very strong wind consistently throughout Tuesday morning, just pushing this water forward to the point where now the water is rising to meet the dock here, and in fact it is splashing over the dock from time to time. This water, a few hours ago this morning before we got daylight, was pushing some debris up to the point where the slip met the parking lot, and you can see some of the debris from before. That's from Monday, when we had strong winds and rains pushing up a lot of that debris, and you can see pretty much where that debris line ended on Monday. The water today has not threatened that line to this point, but it is certainly getting very close, as you can see. So the concerns here is, how far is this water going to rise? The street out in front of the parking lot is about 50 yards from here, so it would take probably a great deal of push, this force from the wind behind me, and water, say precipitation, to threaten the street ahead. But we're keeping our eye on this. We're also looking at this as I point you in this direction. This is a sailboat that has been here this morning. We suspect that it got loose from somewhere on Monday or overnight and ended up here in the wee hours of the morning on Tuesday, just leaning just like that, sort of moored into the sand. It has become stuck here just offshore and has been at a 45-degree angle consistently, although it has begun to rock as these winds and the force of this water has begun to push farther and farther towards the shoreline. It is rocking right now, in fact. So we're keeping an eye on that boat. It is called the Fancy Free out of Fort Pierce, Florida. It has been very much an attention getter, with several members of the media coming and doing stories on this boat, which somehow apparently is lost, and perhaps the owner doesn't even know it at this point. But that's what we're looking at right now, the strong winds coupled with the onrushing water, and we wonder if it will replicate what we saw on Monday when we had the strong winds and heavy rains, as the winds are picking up as I speak, and it's beginning to drizzle just a bit as I speak as well. in St. Lucie County at the Fort Pierce Inlet, I'm Ron Burke.
All right. Thank you, Ron. We appreciate those updates. And guys, as with any natural disaster, people will be looking to FEMA for assistance. So I want to bring in our Matthew Van, who's on the ground at the FEMA headquarters in Washington, D.C. So, Matt, if you can just tell us what FEMA is instructing people to do right now.
Kimberly, we're here at the National Response Coordination Center at FEMA headquarters in Washington, D.C. I want you to take a look behind me. This is where emergency management offices all across the state of Florida, first responders, aid groups like the Red Cross, the National Guard, come into contact with FEMA as Hurricane Dorian now makes its way upward past the Florida coast, potentially into parts of Georgia and the Carolinas. Kimberly, I can tell you that there is a sense of urgency here since the Response Coordination Center has been activated. They've been fielding calls on everything from potentially life-threatening situations to evacuations, Kimberly.
Yeah, and Matthew, from your understanding, does it seem like there's clear direction on how people should proceed?
Well, Kimberly, obviously having learned from previous storms and hurricanes that have had a similar track to Dorian, like Hurricane Matthew, appropriately named, FEMA is telling residents in those coastal areas that if they've received a mandatory evacuation, that they should leave. The agency also says that as Hurricane Dorian now makes its way northward past the Florida coast into the Carolinas and parts of Georgia, that strong force winds and storm surges are expected.
And do we know, before we go, if FEMA is already prepared to help the Bahamas?
Kimberly, we're told that FEMA, in conjunction with the State Department, Department of Homeland Security, and the U.S. Coast Guard, are coordinating a response to the Bahamas, the devastation that Dorian has wrought in the Bahamas. And the Coast Guard, the U.S. Coast Guard, is also part of a search and rescue mission on the island as well.
All right, Matthew Van, right at the FEMA headquarters in Washington, D.C. Thank you so much. We appreciate it. And guys, I want to turn to Washington, where the president was at Camp David golfing this weekend. So I want to bring in Karen Travers at the White House to get the latest there. Karen, good to see you. Lots of tweets from the president about the hurricane over the weekend.
Yeah, but no tweets today about Hurricane Dorian, Kimberly. As of 11 o'clock, the president was talking about China. He was talking about the mayor of London, who was critical of him for golfing over the past couple of days. But the president hasn't weighed in yet on Hurricane Dorian. And I think, there was some criticism about the president skipping that trip to Poland, sending Vice President Pence instead, and then spending Saturday at his golf club in Virginia, and then spending much of the day yesterday, the Labor Day holiday, also at the golf club in Virginia. Now, the White House, Kimberly, said the president was getting updates every hour about Hurricane Dorian. He did do a briefing at FEMA on Sunday, but those were the last official comments we have from the president on this storm.
Yeah, Karen, and it also seems he's still unsure about what a Category 5 hurricane is and what that looks like.
Yeah, these were more head-scratching comments from the president at that briefing at FEMA on Sunday. The president saying that he wasn't sure if he'd heard of a Category 5. Do people know about Category 5 storms? It was very easy to show that while the president has been in office over the last 2.5 years, there have been several Category 5s, including Hurricane Michael, which hit last year. I actually traveled down to that area with the president afterwards as he surveyed the damage down there. So not sure why the president continues to say this. But he has certainly said this many times before as he marvels at the strength and size of these storms.
Yeah, and Karen, before we go, as you know, there's lots of news that happened over the weekend, including another mass shooting in Odessa, Texas, that left 7 people dead and over 24 people injured. And the 2020 candidates are outraged. They're fed up. So do we know what Congress is going to be doing to address this situation, given this latest tragedy?
There will be more public pressure. Of course, there's pressure from the campaign trail for lawmakers to take some action on background check legislation or something to tighten gun laws. Remember, at the beginning of August, after the El Paso and Dayton, Ohio shootings, the president right away came out and said that he would favor tougher background checks, only to backtrack from that over the month of August. This weekend, the president reiterating that he thinks there already are enough background check laws on the books, and that that doesn't necessarily stop something. The big development, though, today is Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell saying that they'll move forward on something in the Senate if the president says he will sign something, if the president is explicitly clear on what he supports. Of course, the House, Kimberly, has passed a couple different background measures. It hasn't gone anywhere in the Senate. And right now it's a lot of you start, no you start. The president says Congress is working on something. And then we hear today from the Republican leader that it's going to have to be the president who says, let's do this and get the ball moving.
All right, Karen Travers at the White House, thank you so much for the updates. And guys, you'll hear more from all of the candidates on this topic and much more during the ABC News debate next Thursday in Houston. And you'll be able to catch all of that on ABC News Live. So, guys, now we move to an incredibly tragic story out of Southern California. A recreational scuba diving trip turned deadly when the boat caught fire. You see it there, and left 25 people dead and 9 people still missing. So Will Carr is on the ground with the latest. Will?
Good morning, Kimberly. This is the Coast Guard station where search teams are setting out from. You can see that white Coast Guard cutter. It's about to go out a short time from now and head out about 2 hours from where we are out to where that charter caught fire. We were out there and saw search crews combing the area, but the reality of the situation is right now finding survivors is highly unlikely. They're putting a large amount of their attention down at the bottom of the Pacific Ocean where divers are combing about 60 feet deep looking for remains. That first Mayday call came in around 3:30 on Labor Day. We know that when the boat caught fire, 5 crew members were able to jump off. They were rescued, but below deck there were 34 passengers. They were sleeping. Some had celebrated their birthdays the night before. They were having an adventure on that charter boat over Labor Day weekend when something went tragically wrong. At this point, at least 8 people have died. But the Coast Guard is telling us they're expecting to find more remains today, and we're expecting the death toll to jump dramatically. Now, we have seen families come up to this Coast Guard center. They've had tears in their eyes, and they're just asking to find out if their loved ones are alive or dead. At this point, again, authorities believe the death toll will just continue to rise. This has been a gut-wrenching situation for those families and for the members of this community, and we're expecting a lot more information in the coming hours. Kimberly.
All right. Thank you, Will. That is completely devastating. So, guys, before we go, a little bit of good news. A woman on a mission, a rescue mission in Nassau, Bahamas, where Chella Phillips, that's her name, she opened up her own home to 97 dogs to save and protect them from Hurricane Dorian. 97, you heard me right. And on her Facebook page, she wrote, 97 dogs are inside my house and 79 of them are inside my master bedroom. And she later says, each island has an abundance of homeless dogs, and my heart is broken for the ones without a place to hide from a Category 5 monster, and only God can protect them now. So she runs a rescue called the Voiceless Dogs of Nassau, Bahamas, if anyone is interested in learning how to help. So kudos to her. Unbelievable. And guys, continue to take care of yourselves. And if you're around, you can stick around for the briefing room at 3:30 p.m. Then you can check out World News Prime at 8 p.m. And if you want to stay updated on all of our hurricane coverage and everything else, you can download the app or go to abcnews.com. I'm Kimberly Brooks, and I'll see you later.